Brothers and sisters, when the Pitchfork Rebellion, which what we are is people that live out in the forest who have been being harmed by the timber industry, they spray helicopters and poison us, they harm us. When we began looking for help, there was one environmental organization in Eugene that really stood up to the plate and helped us, helped rural Oregonians, helped forest dwellers, and that was the Native Forest Council, an organization that has not sold out. Native Forest Council, Bill Barton, William. These are the good guys.
Thanks, Dean. All right. Well, hello there, fellow human beings. It's really an honor to be here and speak with you today. We're talking about something that affects all of us and all of our children and all of their children and all of their children on down the line. When the Europeans first hit the west coast of the United States, there was a forest that stretched from northern California all the way to Alaska and the tundra. It seemed endless to them. And as we tried to open the country up, put in railroads and infrastructure to begin to develop this country, the powers that be granted huge land grants to the railroad, which became the ONC lands, the Oregon and California Railroad lands. Those lands became embroiled and entangled before the turn of the century in tremendous amount of logging industry fraud and deception, and in 1916 those lands were revested to the federal government. At this time, the Bureau of Land Management is in the process of doing what they're calling the Western Oregon Plan revisions, as I'm sure many of you are aware. The problem is that the West isn't what it was. 95% of the big trees are gone, and they want to go in and try to finish it off. We don't think that's a good idea. That's the gene pool, that's the climate, there go your fish. Now, we're not having a commercial fishing season this year in Oregon and off the coast of California. There's a reason for that. Every drainage between here and San Francisco has been completely degraded by commercial logging. Much of it subsidized by you, the taxpayer. They don't want you to know this. They don't want you to know that you're paying them to take your trees and the services that they provide. Those trees stand out there and they clean our air and they clean our water and they hold the soils, they keep our streams clean, and we as humans are the beneficiaries of the services they provide. Now, if we continue to tear out and rip out and cut and slaughter nature, there will come a time of reckoning that is actually probably upon us really quickly here. We have the opportunity as individuals every morning to get up and look around us and say, okay, what is it that I can do? Right now, what you can do is you can stand for the truth inside the logging debate. There's no integrity in the legislature, in the Congress of the United States, in the timber industry. These folks are lying to us. They're taking our trees, they're taking our water, they're taking our fish. What we need to do is we need to stand clearly for what's right. We need to stand for our kids and our grandkids and create something out there that's positive and light and works for all of us. So what does that look like? What we're looking at right now is we're looking at 5% of the old growth. That's a great thing. We've got to save it. I don't think there's a sane human being on the planet that would argue with that. But what about the baby old growth? What about the trees that come up to replace those that we've already taken, that 95% that's already been put through the mill? What about those trees? Your Senator Wyden and your Congressman DeFazio both have plans to go in and open up the matrix lands to huge extraction, subsidized extraction, commercial logging in the name of restoration. They're calling it restoration, but we haven't yet been able to get them to tell us how heavy commercial thinning equals restoration. That is a question that needs to be asked. The logging industry takes more tax subsidies than almost any other industry in the United States. In the latest Farm Bill, Weyerhaeuser and Plum Creek, just the two of them, pulled $682 million in tax breaks. Now, at the same time that the mills are closing here in Oregon and Washington and California, and the workers are being put out of work, they're giving those folks huge tax breaks. Well, you know what they're doing? Last year, their exports went up 30% in Oregon and Washington. Raw log, 30% increase in export volume. So they're taking the trees, they're taking the money, they're taking your soil, they're taking your water, they're taking your fish, they're taking your grandkids' life. And it's up to us to bring this stuff into the light so that we can choose again. We have the opportunity to do that. We have the opportunity to change this conversation, and each day, each one of us can find something to do with that. 10 months ago, I was a contractor. I had no idea what was going on. I went and I sat down at the Forest Council, and all of a sudden, there was an opening. And now I see possibility where there was none. I used to work in the woods. I saw the error of my ways, and I now am standing on the right side of the tracks, or however you want to look at that. We can change. We don't have to follow the road to oblivion. We do not have to go down this path. If we bring some honor and some integrity and some light to this conversation, it will shift. That's what it's going to take. A few weeks ago, I was working with a Native American friend of mine down on a ridge in Nevada. We were standing out in the pinyon pines and the sagebrush. And I asked him, I said, what do you think would make the difference in this whole thing? Because their lands are being degraded too. The corporate interests are taking their trust lands and doing things. He looked at me and he said, if we brought one spiritual leader into every boardroom of this country, this conversation would shift overnight. And we have lost our path. We have lost our connection to the earth. And he went on to tell me about how he has been able to reassemble a circle of elders and how they're starting to reconnect with the land there after many years of being, schooled in BIA schools and those things. We can change. We can shift. We do not have to finish what we started. If we are to survive as a race, if we are to have the future be one of brightness and light for our children, all there is to do is change the conversation that we are as a culture so that we can mature and age gracefully just like an old-growth forest does. An old-growth forest is full of dead wood, it's full of rotten trees, it's full of fire, it's full of bugs, and it goes on and on. Our culture seems to want to stay fresh and young, and we will consume ourselves to death if we're not careful. So when you get up in the morning, and you wonder what you can do, find a way to lower the size of your footprint. Now you're talking to guys, size 15s here. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. There are ways that we each day can choose something different. Demand the truth from your congressman. Demand the truth from your business leaders. They are not worried about jobs. They are not worried about bankrupting our communities. They're not worried about that. They're worried about 5 cents on a $100 bill. Your $100 bill, your environmental services turn into 5 cents of fraudulent logging profit. We can't do it. We can't afford to give them any more. So stand up, give it a hoot, and let's go ahead and stop this conversation where it is now and start a new one that's full of life and full of joy.